and welcome to the last stream of THETA 2017. Now, the next speaker, James Harper, previously worked for me, and I'm very proud to be up here chairing his session. James is the Associate Director for Strategy and Design at the University of Auckland, with responsibilities for many of the digital transformation initiatives for legacy systems and services. He is undertaking part-time study towards a law degree, which is an increasingly relevant skill for IT practitioners as new technologies meet entrenched ways of operating. This probably underrates what James does. As a member of Strategy and Design, he really has looked over the years at new technologies and how we bring them into the university. So I'd like to now welcome James to the stage.
Thanks very much, Liz. I've forgotten what I'd written there, so all of the stuff that I was going to talk about in the first slide, Liz has actually sort of covered there a little bit. But what I'm looking to do today, what I'm sort of intending to cover, is not any answers to the digital transformation of assessment or online exams or anything like that, but just to relate to you the story that we've had at the University of Auckland so far, some of the things that we've discovered, some of the challenges that we think lie ahead for us, and a bit of an introduction to the topic if this is something that's new for you. So as Liz said, I'm a part-time law student, which is, consists of web browsers and word processors all year until the final exam where you sit down for 3 hours and you get cramp in your hand because you're writing with a pen that you're so unfamiliar with. 20 years ago, I did an honours degree in computer science, and that was another case for very different reasons where sitting down with a pen at the end of your semester to demonstrate your learning wasn't maybe the most effective assessment method. So thinking about the digital transformation of our teaching and learning, the origins of the word lecture from the Latin is really about reading aloud. Before the printing press, lectures were a really, really efficient way of copying material. So I would stand at the front of the room and I would talk from my book, and you would all have your notes, and you'd be copying them out, and at the end of the semester you would have a book of notes. But things have changed significantly for us in how we teach in the intervening time. The statement up the top there is from the introduction to my land law lecture book, course book. The more active the classroom, the better the learning experience for everyone. So, these days, the purpose of the lecture has transformed. How we teach has transformed, MOOCs, learning management systems, flipped classrooms. How we build the buildings that the teaching happens in has transformed. But the one aspect of the university that hasn't transformed is that final exam. So after 3 months of all this modern learning, you sit down with a pen and paper to prove what it is that you've learned. There is a certain beauty in that brutality of being faced up with a blank piece of paper, but it's far from the most effective way to assess your learning. So that can't, of course, ignore the fact that exams are important. They really go to the quality of the degree, the quality of the institution. I'm not so sure I saw any badges from Unitech out there. Anybody from? So some of you may have seen in the media if you're based in New Zealand. Last weekend, one of our tertiary education providers here had a situation where cheating on the final exam was brought to the attention of media. People resigned, governments got involved, and all of that sort of thing. There's no way that that media attention didn't affect the perception of the degree, the perception of the organisation. So there's a certain gravitas that comes with a 3-hour final written exam with very strict conditions. So that's sort of the organisational aspects of the exam. But what about the people? Here's a photo of the Auckland Law School Running Club. Everybody there, with the exception of me in the back there, was born in 1997 to 1999. Don't worry, even though I'm twice their age, I can still run faster than all of them. The quote up the top there from Alan Kay, a noted computer scientist that I think about a lot. Anything, No, it hasn't been cut off. It's almost been cut off. Technology is anything that wasn't around when you were born. So when these students were born, Google was founded in 1998, but you were probably still using Alta Vista. Telecom launched its first broadband offering in 1999. You had computers that were quite modern coming through in the 2000s, and Windows XP, which was still running at the University of Auckland, and you probably were. That was first launched in 2001. So these students entering this year into university have grown up in an always connected digital environment. Their expectations are fundamentally different than I had when I entered my first degree. The other aspect of what they'll be bringing to the organisation is that NZQA have a great digital assessment plan. Within the next decade, students that come to the university will be coming from an environment where they've already been assessed online as a standard way of learning. So NZQA by 2020 wants to have appropriate assessments online. This year they're piloting 15 subjects on an opt-in basis. It's up to the individual schools to choose whether or not they use school computers or whether or not they use students' own computers. They have an amazing resource that you can find through Google. You possibly don't need to copy the entire URL down. But an amazing resource online about their plans here, what their strategy is and how they're executing on that. They're operating a tender this year for a product and partners to do that. So we'll be watching really closely to see how that happens. But it's also been a rocky journey for some of the schools that have been part of that pilot. A fairly prestigious Auckland school's online maths exam failed quite catastrophically. Students were very upset, parents were very upset, and it does shake the confidence in the service. So it's important that we are aware of the risks that this transformation brings. So some of our own experiments in this space. The university, in its Stage 2 market research paper, has been running online assessments at the end of the year for a little while now. In the first semester of last year, that didn't go entirely to plan. It wasn't done in great coordination between the various IT teams and the various stakeholders involved. We had faulty computers, students sitting down and the computer in front of them wouldn't work. Then the invigilators who were there to see whether or not people are passing notes, suddenly these people were expected to be IT support because they were the figures of authority that were there and nobody else was around. Of course, they didn't know, they didn't have the first clue about how to help somebody log on. So that made the staff there feel very stressed as well as the students. The people that were setting the exam, they had put together the instructions based on their computer in their office and their environment, and that didn't precisely translate to the environment that the students were sitting the exams in. So the screenshots looked slightly different and maybe some of the steps weren't quite exactly the same. You could probably work it out if you weren't in an incredibly stressed situation already, but that was just another straw on the back of the camel. So it wasn't a great experience, but the saving grace about this course is that it has a really heavy focus on internal assessment. So all of the students that were taking these online exams, they'd already passed the course. There wasn't an opportunity for anybody to fail as a result of this. They could only improve their grade from where they were. So that was a really sort of low risk, or relatively low risk entry into the space for us there. In semester 2, we changed some things. We got the IT team involved. We had a person check every single computer before the students went into the room. We had that same person walk through the instructions in that environment to make sure that as somebody coming in that knew nothing about any of this, they knew exactly what needed to be done. And they stayed for the duration of the exam. They didn't have to do anything, but they gave the peace of mind to the staff and to the students. So we had a great outcome in semester 2. It went a lot more efficiently than it had in semester 1. But of course, having an IT support person in every single exam room doesn't exactly scale. It was great for a pilot. It's not. It's probably not where we see things going in the future. So after that experience, we had a lot of stuff that we'd learned about this, and we started to think about what we had to do to actually make this service scale. So the first point was, how good do our online exams need to be? The first PM that was associated with this project wanted to hire generators in case the power went out. And we said, we kind of already accepted this risk. If the power goes out in a lecture theatre, like this, it's pitch black. There's no natural light. Your exam's over anyway. So, making sure that we are aiming to protect against appropriate risks, and not necessarily thinking about risks that we couldn't deal with in a written exam situation anyway, seems like a good baseline. In terms of equipment failure, I take 4 pens into an exam. My primary pen, I take a backup pen for that when that one runs out. I've got a third pen just in case there's something wrong with those two. And then a fourth one, usually from a different manufacturer, just in case that particular batch of Bic pens had some latent fault across all 3 of them, and all 3 of them failed. So that's about the extent of the scope of equipment failure in a written exam, right? It's fairly low. I've never had even 1 pen fail, but I still take 4 in. On the topic of online exams, of course, the number of components that could potentially fail is so large that you can't really, I think, consider protecting against failure as a successful strategy there. You probably need to think about how you recover gracefully from failure. So an example of that is using software that constantly is saving back to some other system so that you can pick things up more quickly, or if something fails, you can pick up somewhere else. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. We also understand the risk of cheating in paper-based exams fairly well. We know we're not infallible, but we accept a certain amount of risk. The potential for cheating in online exams, of course, is just innumerable. As somebody who's also responsible for the security team within the University of Auckland, I could give them 10 seconds and they would think up 50 ways that they could cheat in an online exam. So that possibly means that we need to think a little bit more holistically about what it is that we're assessing, what constitutes cheating in the online assessments that we do. Not something in the scope of our discussions, but certainly something to be thinking about. So that's the sort of the environment. What about the people? How does this affect the people? Well, we think that we've got a pretty good story to tell around disabled students, particularly visually impaired students. So visually impaired students, when they're working on an exam at the moment, they may sit with a reader and writer who writes for them and undertakes the examination in conjunction with them. With an online exam, you can potentially utilise a screen reader and braille keyboards that are likely to be faster, and also something that students are intimately familiar with because they have been working with them throughout the entire course of their studies at university. So you're not putting them into a fundamentally different environment for that final exam. But the one that everyone comes back to with this sort of stuff is around the equity issues of moving to online assessments. And particularly, how much can you write? So very roughly, people can type twice as fast as they can write. I can write about 4 double-spaced pages in a 1-hour exam. That's 64 lines, which works out to around 650 words. Tested this a couple of days ago. I can write 27 words per minute. So in that 1-hour exam, I'm spending 24 minutes writing, and I'm spending 36 minutes thinking about what I'm going to write, or not writing at my optimal speed because I'm sort of thinking and writing at the same time. So about 45% of that time in the exam is writing, and the other roughly half is cogitating, hopefully, or praying, who knows. Assuming the same proportion of writing to thinking time in an online exam, suddenly I can type 52 words per minute. I'm generating over 1,200 words. So in very practical terms, the time spent on marking an online exam is going to double. So this is a very real impact on the people that have to mark these exams, that suddenly they're going to be reading twice as much in order to mark the same assessment. So the other interesting aspect here is that a fellow called Derek Mueller at the Pepperdine School of Law took a lot of his exam answers over a wide number of years, and he found a weak but demonstrable correlation between word count and exam score. The more you write, the higher you score. Now there's some outliers there that, you know, if you genuinely don't know what the topic of the subject, you probably haven't got too much to write about it. Regardless of how much you write, that's not really going to affect your score. And it certainly seems to plateau that at a certain point, no matter how much you write, your score sort of hits a natural limit there. But there is this this correlation between you write more and you get a higher score. And that's not a problem if everyone improves their score by the same amount. You just scale everybody down a little bit. Unfortunately, the studies that we've seen in terms of writing and typing speed consistently show that the variation in typing speed is much, much wider than the variation in writing speed. So the two bell curves that you see there, the blue one is typing speed, the orange one writing speed. I'm the little red dots there, so you can see that I'm sort of roughly at the same place on each of the bell curves there. But the spread of typing speed amongst an adult population is much more spread out than writing speed is. So the data we have here is for adult populations of native speakers. I think the results could be quite different when you're thinking about multicultural environments where English may not be the first language, or where they've grown up using a keyboard all the way from birth. So this is certainly an area that we need to explore more about, but it's something where at first glance the evidence suggests that it's something we do need to give some thought to. So next up, the equipment. So we have around 6,000 computers on our campus available for students. Of course, you can't use them all in an exam period because some of those computers students are going to be wanting to use them to study for their upcoming exams. So let's assume that we have 3,000 computers available to do these online exams with. We typically leave a gap between each computer so that you can't look over and see what the guy next to you was writing. So that means 1,500 are usable. A couple of exams a day, that means that you're getting 3,000 computer-based exams every day. We have 28,000 undergraduate students at the University of Auckland. They're, that's not master's students and doctoral students who are submitting by theses, but those 28,000 students that are sitting an exam at the end of their course. 3.5 exams per semester on average. That's 100,000 exams every semester. I sort of had to double check that a couple of times when I worked that figure out, because it's a phenomenal, remarkable figure that we all inherently know, but when you put it on paper like that, the fact that we're generating 100,000 exam scripts and marking them every semester is quite phenomenal. So over our current 15-day exam periods, we've got those 3,000 computers that are available. The upper limit of online exams that we could execute, given the number of computers that we have available, is 45% of our exams. So it's not a scalable solution that takes us all of the way to online exams as the default for every course. So, we could try to increase the proportion of computers that we use. Maybe we have different exams so that the person sitting next to you is doing a different exam. You can't copy off them. But I think probably the answer that's best aligned with our digital strategy is to look to use students' own devices to do these exams on. Certainly where secondary schools are looking at this as an option. And it's in line with our strategy to reduce the number of PCs on campus in favour of BYOD anyway. So that ratio of computers to students, we expect that to become less favourable. So that challenge, that 45% number, is going to get lower over time rather than higher. So thinking about we've got all these computers there, but this is not just a case of putting a student in front of the computer and having it work. We've spent a fair bit of time looking at various types of software that can support these sorts of online assessments. And I think what we've seen pretty much universally is that the products that are in this space at the moment were not designed to scale to 3,000 tests per day. They're probably designed for organisations that don't have bricks and mortar facilities, or for organisations where they have much smaller class sizes. So the level of automation, orchestration, integration, all of those sorts of things that make something scale, we haven't seen that in any of the stuff that we've looked at so far. But we do expect some really rapid development in this space as more and more organisations transition to online exams. So the options broadly, I think, sit on a continuum of stuff that works on a wide variety of platforms. It's really, really open. At the most simple sense, you put a person in front of a word browser, a copy of Word or a web browser, and that'll run on pretty much anything, but there's very little ability to sort of control the environment or control any sort of cheating or anything like that. Down the other end, you've got the Take a Test app that's built into the anniversary edition of Windows 10, and that thing is amazing. You log onto the computer and there is no concept of an explorer or a start menu or anything like that. It's just the app, and that's all the computer is doing. But that only runs on Windows 10 Anniversary Edition. So really well controlled, but very limited environments within which it can run. Android, if we're thinking about BYOD, Android is a real outlier. We're not seeing great support in any of these vendors for Android platforms. You sort of have to choose the level of openness and the level of risk on a continuum at this point. And this is going to be a rapidly changing spectrum, we think. But we don't think at this point or in the near future there's anything that sits quite where we need it to be. So our likely answer here is probably that we take something like this controlled environment, but we project it out to a student's own device using a VDI or remote desktop type solution. That's probably, I think, in the medium term, the answer that is going to give us that, solve that scarcity of device issue, the compatibility issue, and also provide that level of control over the environment. Speaking of the environment, online exams certainly don't sit alone in terms of the service that the organisation provides. So this is the diagram of our entire exam process. And you've got the online exam right there in the middle. And all of the arrows in red are things that change as a result of online exams. You'll note there are a lot of red arrows up there. So this is something that's pretty impactful to not just the student's experience, but also to the processes that sit around the exam system. So, we have the opportunity, as an example of one of the process that's changing here, we have the opportunity to move in online exams from a student requesting their marked script back to putting that electronic marked script in, say, their Google Drive or their Office 365 OneDrive or something like that, somewhere where by default they get to see it. So that's reduced overheads in terms of having to recall from storage, greater learning opportunity. I'd like to know what some of the questions that I missed out on potentially in a final exam. But there is a concern that it will increase the number of queries of students saying, hey, hang on, I don't agree with this. I think I got this point. Can you please bump me up to an A+? I'm not happy with my A. So in certain areas of the university, the opaque exam process is seen to have advantages over having that openness. So this is very much not a technology-only solution here. You very much have to think about the people, the processes that are involved as well. So I talked a little bit before about our experiences in 2016. What are we doing this year in 2017? Well, we're taking 2 or 3 law courses, not ones that I'm in, unfortunately, and we are moving them to a more structured online exam using one of those products that I mentioned before, a product called ExamSoft. We haven't made any strict commitment to ExamSoft. We think it's sort of in that middle area, and it's good for us now, but the jury's out on its long-term applicability. So the options are that, or at least the characteristics of this are that, there's still going to be a printed exam book. It's just that you do your answer on the computer. It is an open book exam, which does help with the cheating aspect a little bit, that, it's possibly less constrained. But there isn't going to be a network connection. It's going to be marked online, so the process extends a little bit beyond the online exam. What we didn't want is to take all of these online exams and just have the lecturer print them out and then end up with a big stack of paper anyway, which they then mark. So we are going to be marking them online as well, and the students will have access to that mark script. It's 60 to 80% of the final grade. So you remember I said before it didn't really count for those ones that we did in 2016. This time it counts. This time if it goes wrong, the student potentially could fail the course. So for that reason, it is opt-in to the students. They can choose still to do a paper-based exam. So I was having a chat to a couple of the students that are in this, well, quite a number of the students that are in these courses about this, and they said the same thing. They think that they will do better because they're going to be able to write more, but they're worried about the possibility of the equipment failure or things going wrong. So those are the two things that I think I've highlighted as probably the two themes that we're seeing here, is that the resilience and the certainty around that exam, we have to balance with the opportunities that it also offers here. And then beyond that, as I said, we'll be starting to think about potentially offering on students' own devices, potentially remote online invigilation and cheating detection. So, we've had some discussions about recording the entire screen during the exam process. Thinking about, like I said before, I can write at 26 words per minute, but I can't while I'm also thinking about it. If you're typing too fast, maybe that's an indication you're just copying from somewhere else, something like that. We're starting to think about access to specialist applications. So none of those applications that I talked about allow you to break out into another application and maybe do some, some scientific or some engineering style work there. We think that's actually pretty important in the long term, so we'll be looking at that, and more of that exam ecosystem coming online. So that's the extent of, well, that's the state of the nation, at least at the University of Auckland. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to do my best to avoid them.